So number one, thank you for being here. I am so passionate about this topic because for me personally, it just hit it just hit home. I want to just give you a little bit about myself and why this is so important. And then I'm going to ask you, well, actually, let me ask you this question first. While I'm speaking, think about your favorite childhood TV show and your favorite characters within that TV show. Now, for some people, you may not have a favorite TV show when you were a child. Maybe it was just a favorite Disney character or something. So I want you to think about that while I tell you my story, because my story might not be that riveting. So think about something else too. So, number one, for me personally, I grew up with first affluence, and I had a grandfather that owned buildings in New York City. My father came from such affluence. My mother, on the other hand, grew up in an orphanage, very, very poor. But by the time she married my father, there was a lot of affluence. So, not by the time, I should say, they already had affluence, they built some more affluence, yada, yada. During that time, my father got hurt at work. And so it wasn't so affluent that he was independently wealthy. He wasn't living off of a trust fund. He was working still. He got hurt at work. And pretty soon, my mother, who was a part time seamstress for fun, started needing to work. And she couldn't do enough hems to carry the cost of the 3-story home that we lived in on a farmette and all of that. And she even went to a couple of local churches and a synagogue, and no one would really help her because they said that she wasn't really in need because she wasn't in a poverty situation. So I remember hearing her crying on the phone, begging for even canned goods, and realizing as a teenager, we are very broke. Like, this is very scary. Then they kind of made a turnaround. My father got better, made a turnaround, and had a little bit of money. But by that point, my dad had so many secondary illnesses and disorders from having such acute stress. And it was directly related to the stress. So then fast forward, now I have learned now a feast or famine attitude with money, because when we had excess money, I did not know how to save because everything just came so easy. And then when we were really needing money, I didn't know how to get money. I wasn't taught that. And my parents really didn't have open communication about money in either direction, whether when we were affluent or not. So I remember my first year being out of the house, and I got my first credit card, and I went to a department store, and I ran up the credit card. It was only probably, now this is in the 80s, the credit card was probably $150. And back then that wasn't that bad. And especially at my age, I was, 18, 19 years old. And I remember being in the store, and I still didn't buy for half of my family. And I remember just thinking, I can't buy them anything. And suddenly I felt like I was worthless. So now fast forward, I'm a trauma therapist, I'm working with individuals, and I kept hearing the same stories of, oh, I want to leave him, but I don't have the money, or he feels or she feels like this person is taking advantage. And I just started gravitating more towards doing financial therapy and focusing on finance. In the interim, in all of that time, I also had worked as a journalist, and I also had worked with marketing and PR. So I already had a little bit of a background of working in finance a little bit, and I started taking courses that focused on finance. And so that's where I come from, that I have been very, very poor. I've almost been homeless, actually, when I was in that apartment and young and didn't have any money to buy Christmas presents for people, which doesn't sound like a big deal for a lot of people. But for me at the time, my self-worth was just tied up into it. So now I want you to go to that favorite TV show. And I'm going to tell you about mine, but I'm not going to tell you the details of how it ties into financial therapy yet, unless you want to share. And you could even put it in a chat, or if you want to talk about it. So my favorite childhood TV show was I Dream of Jeannie. And some of you may be way too young to even know the show, but it was about a genie who was very attractive and fun loving and innocent. And she would grant wishes to her master. And growing up, I didn't realize the impact that had on me or why I was attracted to that show. And it became almost, well, it did become an obsession. It became quite the obsession. And in fact, now I even have, and I'm going to show you because I brought some out. I even have, genie bottle memorabilia. I have the actual 1967 decanter. So this one was actually purchased for 25 cents at a garage sale, and I painted it to be the first season. So obviously I was a little obsessed with it, but I didn't realize until I started looking at archetypes what this might mean. So if anyone wants to put in the chat what their favorite shows were, I'm going to look real quickly to see if anyone has anything in there. If you have any kind of, and if you want to just talk, you could also talk as well. You can unmute yourself. But I would love to know what your favorite show was. And I'm not going to put you on, I'm not going to make it embarrassing for you. You could just tell me about it, or you could just write it in the chat, or you can email me at some point and tell me. But in a minute, I can tell you specifically what that meant for me. And it wasn't pretty. I can tell you that for me, it wasn't great when I started realizing what it really meant. So let's see. Well, I don't have anyone in yet, so I'll just tell you mine. So wait, there's a new message.
There's 3 answers.
Oh, there are. Okay. Everybody hates. Oh my gosh. Okay. Care Bears. Okay. Everybody hates Chris. His dad was financially responsible. Okay. So Care Bears. Now I'm probably too old to know some of these. I know my children watched these. So with Care Bears, tell me what it was about Care Bears that you liked, or was there a special Care Bear that you enjoyed? And I'm not going to go into details with them. You can also figure out what it was. So you know what? Let me just tell you mine, and then you'll be able to self-analyze yourself on this. So let me just show you. Again, this is what the bottle looked like that the genie lived in. And so this guy, Major Nelson, had this bottle always sitting out all of the time. And she would go into this bottle for her quiet time, or when she was bad. I didn't realize how toxic, actually. It was a comedy, but I didn't realize how toxic it was. So even when my father was affluent, and the the way they love the hate away. With Jeannie, what she would do is she would just be overly eager, people pleasing to the point of fault. And she would be get into trouble. There was always some kind of dilemma, and it's a sitcom, so there was always something happening, some kind of a conflict. There was always some kind of jealousy that she had. And so growing up, I just loved the idea of escaping into a bottle. And for me, what it was is I was born 10 years later than the other children. And I didn't realize what it was is that was my safe space. I did not realize all of those years that I loved that show, that the symbol or the archetype for me was that that was a safe space. So how does this tie into financial therapy? So for me, and this is what you could do as well when you're thinking about your specific favorite show or favorite character. And because some people have, Snow White or Crocodile Dundee or whatever, G.I. Joe, all different types of archetypes, Superman. You look at what is the positive of that character and what is the negative. Every single sitcom or every character that children tend to love has a dark side, even if you don't realize it has a dark side. So for me, the dark side was Jeannie was always getting into trouble. And Jeannie would also do things that would self-sabotage her. And she would go overboard. And she was all about the people pleasing, which sounds a lot like me in the middle of a department store, running up a credit card, trying to buy expensive gifts for people so that I could say that, I put money and effort into this gift. Therefore, I really am showing you how I love you and how I care about you. And look at me, I'm succeeding on my own. And that wasn't the case at all. And I don't even think at that time frame there were dollar stores, but I could have easily have even just given everybody a card or made everyone banana bread, but I didn't do that. I opted to go the high spending route, ran myself in debt. And at that age, running myself in debt just snowballed into more debt. I ended up having a car repossessed. Oh, and by the way, I should mention, I was also being kicked out of my apartment. I was really young. We're talking 18, 19 years old, being kicked out of my apartment. I knew I was going to be kicked out of my apartment. So what did I do? I put all of my favorite things, including heirlooms from my mother, into the back of my car that they don't even make the card anymore. But I put it in the back of the car, and the car was repossessed the next day. So not only did I lose everything, but I lost heirlooms as well. And it took so much out of me to lose things that were so sacred and important to my family, my mother's wedding veil and things like that. So when you look at your favorite shows, when you look at your favorite characters as a child, look at, was there anything in that character that you were connecting with or compensating for? Or was that character in some way a surrogate in some way? So that's just kind of a segue into understanding self-worth and understanding how you put meaning to things. So especially as a child, and how that stays with you getting older. Now, for me personally, you guys probably don't do this, but for me personally, I still have a huge I Dream a Genie collection. It's still important to me. Do I still imagine that I'm hiding in a bottle? No, but it's something that's a fun memory for me. So I want to go into, before we start anything, I want to go into the financial perceptions survey. And real quick, I just want to see if there's any more. I'm going to hit it again real quick. Okay. All right. So I asked about, in The Wizard of Oz, who do you feel was the wealthiest? And it was interesting because this one was across the board, almost, 30%, 30%, 20%, so there was no winner in this. I would say that I have to go in the light here. So Dorothy and the Good Witch are actually the wealthiest that in the survey. And the next was the Mayor of Oz, and the Lion was in there as well. So some of the reasons, he had the largest house, she had the greatest wealth of support and love. He ruled over Oz, her sparkly outfit and how she was able to give Dorothy all she needed, the most well-rounded life. But actually, the wealthiest was technically the Wicked Witch, because she was the only one that actually had her own true place. She actually had staff, and the ruby slippers were actually hers. She was the rightful heir to the ruby slippers. So technically, she would have been the wealthiest. Dorothy was a child, and the Good Witch, she did look the part, but we don't know where she really came from, and she didn't seem to own a whole lot. But I mean, it's up in the air. It could be anything. That's just my perception of it. But it's interesting how when we look at money, if we look at our perceptions are also different, but we all pretty much think that a certain amount of money is doing well, or a certain amount of money is not, and it's poverty. But we don't really have a concrete view of what a wealthy person looks like, because of our own childhood, the environment, our perceptions, and all of that. So hold on, let me just close up one thing. Yeah, exactly. The bad witch just wanted to get her shoes back. That is really the way I see it. And I wrote a book a long time ago that is not available now, and it was about gifted children. And I was looking at how gifted children often don't have the same type of esteem. Now, things are different now, but I still think that children who are disadvantaged in other ways tend to be just nurtured more. And gifted children tend to have expectations tied to them more often. And that's where that initial survey really came from, that, because I would say, okay, who do you think is the person who needs the most help right now? And nobody at that time said the Wicked Witch, because they saw her as bad. But the Wicked Witch, in fact, was somebody who, just with a little bit of compassion, probably would have been okay. So now, going on to who was the villain, almost everybody said the Wicked Witch. And one person, no, I don't know, because I put the colors too close together, so forgive me. It is the Good Witch, or it is Dorothy as the villain. So I'm not sure on that, who said, oh, okay, Dorothy. Yes, a stranger came, murdered someone immediately, and you know what? You are my person, because that's how I feel. Because I see it as Dorothy murders someone, and somebody tells her to take the shoes. They tell her to steal something that does not belong to her. She takes them, wears them, and then is like, yeah, I'm not giving them back to you. And I see that as like so not healthy on so many levels. But I get it. It's the movie, and the Wicked Witch is even called the Wicked Witch and so forth. I get it. And the book, actually. So I get where the biases come from, but the biases come from someone tweaking the story and making someone look a certain way as a good person, as an innocent person. I mean, honestly, if I had a daughter that ran off with 3 guys in the middle of the woods and stole things, I would not be super happy about that. So anyway, all right. And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up out of this was talking about actually, what did you find valuable? And it was interesting because obviously ruby slippers, but that was only 33% ruby slippers. The other thing was water was the second thing. The Yellow Brick Road was 11%. Poppies, the poppy field, was 11%. And we had, what else in here? Dorothy was actually 11%. So it was interesting how the symbols of value are different. And just think about that when it comes to financial therapy. We all think different things are more valuable, and in different stages of our lives. I mean, what I found valuable in my 20s, and the amount of energy and the amount of time I would spend to working, as opposed to now, where to me value is having a little bit more free time and being able to enjoy things. So when I was younger, enjoyment meant to me achievement. And so things through our lives will change as well. And that's normal and that's fine. It's just that when you work with people, whether you're a medical doctor or a psychologist or a therapist, no matter who you are working with people, knowing that what you find important is not going to be what they find important. And I'm in a religious organization where I came in and I was like, oh, I do marketing and PR. Let me help you. And you need to grow your membership, and you need this and you need that. And they were sort of like, oh no, we want to stay small. And I was thinking, why? Like, why would you want to stay small? The more people, the more money. But they were comfortable with that. And so I was coming in with my own bias of what I thought was important. And then I had to take a step back and realize that I'm the new person and they need to tell me what they need. So based on that, some of the things I also wanted to say is I really like everybody's response of, she represented hope, it got her home. Somebody said random crap. To go home was the whole point. So this is, why did you choose something as a valuable symbol? Following the Yellow Brick Road led to success. Water is the most essential resource, inherently possesses the greatest value. Without it, nothing else may be achieved or earned. And in the end, the water is what actually had the Wicked Witch melt. So it's interesting how we see things. So based on that, I want to talk about actual signs of financial trauma. And at any point, if anyone wants to pop in with a question or a comment, definitely do that. So you already have the handout of the signs of financial trauma. Just in case you haven't looked it over, I'm going to blow through it really quickly because I don't like when people read off of cards or whatever. Anxiety, avoidance, relationship strain, obviously. It's one of the number one reasons for divorces, not infidelity. Uh, Although there is financial infidelity, and we'll have that fun in a bit. Low self-esteem, maladaptive coping strategies, mechanisms, and physical symptoms. Physical symptoms are overlooked often when it comes to financial strain. And honestly, my father died from financial strain. He did not die from being hurt at work. He actually passed from the financial trauma that he had. So it's very meaningful to me. And that can also look like, so if you're working with someone and they are saying that, obviously always, no matter what, if you're a medical professional, obviously you're going to do this, but if you're any kind of a therapist or coach or anything, you're going to need to make sure that they get medically checked. You never make an assumption on anything that's physical or emotional, but headaches, digestive issues, a lot of aches and pains, what they describe as almost a fibromyalgia, those kind of things, even being clumsy, disoriented, lightheadedness sometimes, all of that can be from financial strain. So it's okay to ask those questions of, a lot of times in therapy, you'll say, how did you sleep? Or are you eating well? And what was this week like for you? But also ask, are you under financial strain? You don't have to tell me details because it's very sensitive for people to talk about. And you will find, and I think with the friends I have that are medical professionals or therapists in any way, shape, or form, you will find that people will hide that from you as sort of the last frontier. They will tell you about fungus on their feet before they will tell you about their financial history, usually, because they think that their finances are so directly related to their self-worth, where they think that being ill or even having a relationship struggle is something that happens to them. They often will feel like, oh, I got sick, or, oh, my partner cheated. These things happened to me. They may understand that they played a part in it. I'm obese because I ate too much. I got hurt and I gained weight. I need to work out more. But they still feel like the weight happened to them, or the relationship is a struggle, but in some way, yeah, they played a part in it maybe, but it happened to them. They know that their financial situation, for the most part, did not just happen to them, even if they grew up in extreme poverty. And sometimes they will say, I had complete poverty and, this is happening, with my partner, they're spending money, but they don't even think about that being financial infidelity or financial trauma. So it's really important to be very compassionate and don't ask such pointed questions that are, too revealing. You want to give them a lot of safety net and bring it up a lot. Other people that I talk to when they have some of these ailments or when they're going through a relationship struggle, money's also tight because people in any relationship struggle will start to hold onto their money because their money is survival. It's evolutionary. So one of the number one things you see, especially in a relationship that's crumbling, is people start either overspending or hiding money. And I get that sometimes that has to happen in order to get out of a dangerous situation, but sometimes it's just a survival move that they're holding on to money and all of a sudden they don't trust the person with money anymore. Because what's happening is they are losing the oxytocin has left the building. They don't trust the person anymore generally. So of course they're not going to trust them with money, especially if money is tied to their survival. So now I'm not going to go through and read everything here. You can read it on your own. I go into all of the different types of archetypes. If you want, you can go through the archetypes and even connect it to your favorite show or character. So for mine, when I went through the archetypes, so Jeannie would have been love, she would have been the lover, and she would have been the innocent. And so the shadows of that. So on the good note, it is she's giving and fun loving and childlike. That's on a good note. And on a bad note, on the shadow that she'd have to work on, it would be mischievous, it would be jealous, it would be boundary crossing. So go through that on your own. And if you want to do so now and share something, you don't have to do it in the chat though, because it's being recorded. So, you know, start to look at that a little bit, look at yourself. And also you can ask, you know, your partners, friends, parents, and kind of have the discussion. It's a very safe way to open up money discussions because it's not going to feel like a money conversation. It's going to feel like a fun conversation. And it's very important because a lot of families don't have money conversations. Mine did, in spite of, or I should say mine did not, in spite of all the turmoil. You either heard of complaining and arguing, or sadness and stress, or you observed it, or you just had things. And sometimes the conversations weren't always there. And many conversations that families have are more like, they're more like work hard, save money. Not a lot of families will say, hey, make sure you open up a Roth in addition to, you know, this certain type of, you know, insurance, universal life, in addition to make sure, you know how to do stocks. You know, not many children are taught about stocks. Not many people get excited about getting stocks for a holiday unless they understand the value of them. So these are conversations that most people don't have, and most couples don't have them because they're coming from two different money stories. And even if you've been married for a lot of years, it's very tedious to have those conversations. They often escalate into arguments if you do it in a finger pointing way, just like anything. But money stories tend to go that route. So before I go on, I'm going to give you a quick case study. So the case study is going to be, I'm going to read you the case study, and then I'm going to read you a couple of questions. And then I want you to think about how you would address the couple, how you would maybe go to the next step. The next step cannot be, though, send them to a finance therapist. So the next step has to be something that you're doing, whether it is medical, you're a therapist, no matter what it is, whether it's a friend and you're hearing them talk about this. I want to know how you would address them. There is no right or wrong answer unless it's, you know, shaming or something. So there's no negative in this. Let's put it that way. So I'm going to read the first one. So this is about hidden spending in relationships. So I need you to get to that mentality. So it's just Jack and Jill. I try to use really vague names. All of these situations that I'm going to be reading to you are going to be based on previous clients that I've changed enough of the situation and their names, obviously. So Jack and Jill, married for 6 years. Jack came from a very critical background, meaning he could do no right. He very critical. He had a stepfather that was critical, and his father was critical, and his mother was sort of whatever the men want, you know, just she was critical as well. Not much money in their home at all. He didn't come from wealth at all, but they also were misspending money. He now works as a software engineer at a very big tech company. And Jill is from a very affluent background, but she had workaholic parents. So she had everything, but she didn't have attention, okay? So she is very successful and she's really creative. She's a fashion designer and just she loves creativity. She doesn't have as much of a schedule. She makes her own schedule, which she changes all of the time. And she's self-employed. So he works for a company, she's self-employed. And she has a very flexible schedule, maybe shouldn't always. But they do have a comfortable lifestyle because she brings in a decent amount of money. He is the primary breadwinner. And she splurges, though, on a lot of different gadgets. Now, as someone who's self-employed, she also would talk about, you know, oh, I had a new website and then I had it redone. Now, I don't know how much you know about having a website redone, if you don't do it yourself, it could cost easily $8,000 a pop, which is what she used to pay, around $8,000 to $12,000 every time she just wanted a new look to her website. So throwing that out there. And she saw nothing wrong with that. And she just felt like it was very important for her brand. So she always had reasons why these types of splurges were important. So she also would make impulsive purchases and not consult Jack at all. And she did rationalize her behaviors, yada, yada. She also liked to stay connected to friends and family, especially friends and colleagues, where Jack didn't have as close of a relationship with his family, and he didn't want to stay close. And he was more of a loner because he was sort of brought up as a loner. So he did have a passion, though, for clothing. So he always wanted to look like he was wealthier than he was because, well, I won't get into why, but he wanted to look like he was wealthier than he was all of the time. Very big into name brands. His belts, everything had like just everything was name brand on him. And they had a joint credit card. Well, actually, all of their money was joint. And especially this one joint credit card was the one that they would each use for business, for her website, and for his clothing. So we're talking a lot of money on this one credit card, but he never wanted to pay on the credit card because she was also using it for business. And she didn't want to pay on the credit card because he was using it for what she thought was frivolous, his clothing. So they did have shared financial goals. They were renting a beautiful house, and they were saving for a home, and they wanted to have children in the future. They didn't know if it was in the cards for them, but they wanted to have children and a home. But they also did not discuss money at all with each other. It was really hard to get them to have that conversation. So they would have it with me independently, but they would not do the homework at all. So it was very hard to get them to do the homework. So some of the questions that I have for you is, how might Jack and Jill's professions influence their respective spending habits? Are there certain industry pressures connected? And what challenges do you think they had from their childhood and how they were brought up? And then what communication strategy would you have used to get them to have these conversations in a way that would not be stressful? And is there any safe environment that you would give them to be able to have these conversations? So on that note, if you want me to expand upon them a little bit, I can. But you could go into a breakout room, and then you're going to get together and discuss what you would do as, like, say you're a group working with them. What would you do? And then come back, and maybe one person is the spokesperson to let us know how you would work with them. And again, there is no wrong answer. I'm giving you all three of the examples that I'm giving you were people at the end of their rope. And honestly, there are not enough money conversations. So there's no wrong answer in other than, as long as you're not shaming them, there's no wrong answer at this point. So
how many people do you want in each room?
I would say usually 3 to 5 would be good.
Okay.
To share, I'll just go ahead and one of the things I started from thinking, like, what are their actual goals? Do they have goals? But really, what are their core values? Because it's going to be interesting or important to figure out what they really need in their lives, what they want in their lives, and are they in common? And what are their, we also discussed things like expectations and like, do they feel that they're following the gender roles of, man is the person that's supposed to be the main breadwinner, and any money that a woman brings in is hers to spend, and how what are their expectations, or what were their thoughts coming into this as far as whose money is whose and how it's supposed to be spent or shared.
Mm-hmm. That was really big because they ended up not being in alignment with their values. And they realized that.
Jasmine has left a comment in the chat.
Oh, okay. Further counseling about budgeting, also discuss generational trauma, upbringing impacts, how the communication and work together to make decisions. Absolutely. Generational trauma was big. And they actually, budgeting when you come from those places often looks like sacrifice. And I have nothing against Dave Ramsey. So let me just put that out there. But Dave Ramsey goes on a very sacrifice way of looking at things. And a lot of people these days kind of look at budgeting as it's a punishment. So it's very important when someone has had that generational trauma or their values don't align, because they're coming to the table with their families and grandparents and great grandparents. And then we're starting to talk about immigrants and different things that people have been through and their ancestors. And saying to someone the word budgeting, but maybe tweaking the terminology, because budgeting always comes with most clients with that in some way they're being punished. So to show them that it's actually a gift that you're giving, budgeting is nothing more than boundaries with money. So explaining the boundaries and how to have healthy boundaries with money and not using that term right away with them is super important too. But all of that, the upbringing, how their upbringing impacts is so important. When you do that, you will also get compassion for each other. When you start to look at, because usually they already know, oh, my husband had it bad growing up with his stepfather, or my wife was on her own all of the time. When they start to look at each other with compassion, like, oh, that must have been really hard to have that. Oh, I can see how that would have impacted you. It becomes a whole different feeling. And then once they have a little bit more compassion and you give them some exercises where there's more eye contact or holding hands or something, not your typical date nights, because I tend to think that they don't really work as well, but something where there's a little bit more connection and limited time frame, only 15 minutes of conversation, and then you have to do something different, can really help them to build that oxytocin and trust with each other as well. So that is awesome. I actually didn't go into generational trauma with them. That would have been really good. I think, should we just go right into another one? And we could do it easy, maybe even as a bigger group, or we could do 2 different groups.
That works.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a different one. This one is, well, I'm just going to go ahead and go through it. So again, changing the names, yada, yada. So Maya, 35-year-old accountant, a lot of financial trauma in her life, and she had it chronically and acutely. So, and she came on her own. So she had family debt growing up. So she grew up in a very burdened experience. She also had job loss herself, as did her family. That was just sort of a norm. And there were a lot of periods in her life where there was a lot of unemployment, and they kind of learned to make do with it. And a lot of the unemployment was just because they were in lower, this is before she was an accountant, they were in lower types of like food service and things like that, where people are treated more disposable. They shouldn't be, but they are. There was also a brother, Miguel, who was diagnosed with a chronic illness, and there was a lot of medical treatments and so forth. And she, being the oldest one, she sort of carried a lot of that with her. She had student loan debt as time went on. And she also had a very big identity theft situation. And this is earlier. Like now it's more taken care of these days. But in the earlier days of identity theft, it was a big deal. I mean, it still is a big deal, but it was harder to get credit card companies and PayPal and everything else to recognize it. So that was hard for her. There was also a natural disaster, not the worst thing, but there was some flooding, and that was an issue. And I should also mention, a lot of times people think that they have flood insurance, and most people don't have flood insurance. And even if you're in an area that has flood insurance, what they don't realize is that there's only so much money to go around. So people think that they're going to have everything taken care of, but a lot of times they're only paying for the bare minimum, like just to get the mold out. So that was the situation there. There was also legal battles because there was someone who passed away. They didn't have a will. And so there were legal battles with that. Now, she had more of the leadership focus, and her brother also ended up coming to me for a short time, but he was more, he was babied a lot because he had an illness, and he did overcome the illness, but he just remembers that things were just easy for him because he was taken care of all of the time. So he did have stress, and he saw all the stress, and he was compassionate with the stress, but he didn't have the same responses. So some of the questions that you might want to ask and look at how you would look at things, or express how you would work with this is, number one, she had to strive to maintain her composure all of the time and sort of deal with things. So how do you feel her experience with financial trauma differed from her brother as they got older? Which one do you think would have more of the financial trauma, and physical ailments even from the financial trauma? And I get there's no one way to know this. I'm just saying, kind of guess, work through it. Also, how do they, and this one is about family dynamics. So how do you think they dealt with the lack of a will? How do you think they as siblings dealt with reactions or outcomes to family dynamics when it comes to unemployment? And then also, what different types of interventions would you say would be a good idea for either one of them? So we could just talk about that if you want, and I can give you more insight as you bring things up if you want as well. On they were a really interesting family, and they were really good people. And I would say that even as an accountant, I should also mention, she was a woman of color. And one of the other issues that we had is she knew she was making less than her white male counterparts. And I am not anti-male, and I am not anti-white. So if anyone on here is white and male, I'm not against you. But this is a reality, especially over a decade ago, that women of color would be definitely making less than their white male counterparts. And so, how do we work around that? How do we get to a place where she can bring that up at work and it not be seen as her being a problem? And did she feel even comfortable with that, with all of the unemployment that they had in their family? So these are just some things that kind of happened, but with her specifically, there was just a lot going on. So anyway, so what do you think about that? What do you think about her situation? And also, I should mention, what do you think about her situation when it comes to dating even? So this is a family dynamic, but then what would she be looking for or fear when it comes to dating? Because a lot of times when people date, men or women, or however they identify, when they're going to date, they are also coming to the table, obviously, with perceptions and habits and patterns. So sometimes we're attracted to the problem, and sometimes we're attracted to the solution, and sometimes it's a little bit of everything in between. So go a little bit into that, and you can even write it into the chat as well. Did Jasmine just write, I would recommend both individual and family therapy for this one or for the last one? I think it's for this one. I'm not sure.
I believe it is for this one.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I should mention that they were in their, he was in his late 20s and she was in her very early, like she was maybe, like, I think I had her age in here, but I think she was actually younger than, I have her as 35 here, but I think she was really 32. I think she was more 32 and he was like 28. So I think time frames matter as well, like where you are in your life at that point also matters. So does anyone have an idea on what they would like if she came in and told you that? Now, most clients won't do that initially, but if she came in and said, okay, here's what I've dealt with, you know, I had to kind of protect my little brother, but I've had these things going on and I found out that I'm not making as much as someone else at work. And I've actually been here longer and we have the same background. And why am I making, you know, almost $15,000 less? How, like, is there a way that you would address it that would not rock the boat for her? And, you know, would you ask her to, you know, what kind of things would you want her to do?
I just typed out a whole thing and then
Okay.
it didn't. I wasn't
Okay.
typing. I was just typing into nothing. But what I was going to say is that I have often felt like this scenario. And I feel like what has been easiest for me to like dip my toe into trying a different approach is writing down things, like just even if I'm just writing down how I'm feeling or making a list of things that I feel like I am responsible for, just like dumping out my thoughts instead of allowing them to just swirl around up there.
Absolutely.
That has always been helpful.
Absolutely. I have a client who is a surgeon and she does every single morning, she bullet points every single morning. And then she works out and then she goes to work. But that kind of mind dump helps to keep her fresh all day long. Like she knows, and she even does it sometimes at night too, so that she can just like put it on paper and then have a good night's sleep where she doesn't feel like she has to let it roll around, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, especially, so like you look at someone who's an accountant and you wonder like, why did they go into that line of work? Ask them about why they went into it.
Control.
And then also she feels, if she grew up feeling like she had to take care of her brother, she might be doing that in the workplace and she might be doing too much for too many people without realizing it. And my thing from day one with her was start creating a paper trail. So what you do is you, if your boss sort of asks you to do something verbally, you do the thing, or you write an email like, hey, I just want to be clear, do it all nice. Just want to be clear. You want me to do ABC, right? And then they write back, yes. Okay, boom, paper trail. Like you just keep doing the paper trail. And then you take the paper trail into the, you either create a meeting or you're getting your whatever meeting and you make sure that you have that. And then you go onto Glassdoor and everything else and you put what is a person supposed to be making for this job, armed with all of your successes. And then you ask for a different wage. And now with her, she was really nervous about not wanting to be unemployed. And I kept saying, you are very employable though. Like, so have some other things on the back burner if this doesn't work out. If they are not going to show you your value, have something on the back burner. And this is before, like, there's a trend now of moving jobs every couple of years and so forth with a lot of different types of careers. But at that time, that wasn't a thing. And she was really nervous about that. So that was something that we did. And with her brother, we had to kind of tell him that, you know, he's not a sick little boy anymore. And he cannot be a burden to, and he was 28 years old. And it was time to, for his own self-esteem, to start doing other things and to start, you know, I'm not going to go into details with it, but he had to start, you know, pulling his own weight. So here's a last one. This is a good one. Okay, Mike, 38-year-old attorney, very tight-knit family, but they care a lot about social status and appearances. He witnessed his parents prioritizing material possessions and keeping up with their friends who, it was always like, you know, the grass is greener, always that kind of thing. So here are the different dynamics he had. Neighborhood expectations, believe it or not. They kept moving. They had lifestyle creep, which if you don't know what that is, it's every time you get a raise, every time you get extra money, you're spending it on a bigger house, a better car, in perceived better car, or perceived bigger, you know, well, really bigger house, but better neighborhood, whatever. And so lifestyle creep was happening. And so neighborhood expectations, lifestyle creep. And also with that, he continued the pressure to live a certain standard because his parents were still alive very much, which is good, thankful, but he was living for his parents' approval. He had a lot of different challenges in his early years as an attorney. He had to go from different firm to different firm, you know, where he interned was not where he ended up staying, and then he had to go to a different one. Family dynamics already kind of talked about. He had sibling dynamics as well. Lisa was his sister, and she was a little bit different. She was very frugal, and she married very wealthy, and she prioritized security over looking secure. Like, she prioritized being wealthy over looking wealthy. So that was a struggle for him because he knew it deep down that she had more money, and it killed him. Peer influences, all of his friends were doing the same thing. So if they were all wearing Gucci suits, he was wearing a Gucci suit. None of them really had any money. They were all buying Gucci suits on credit cards. There's environmental factors, which are really, that's going to be more not only your family and friends, but also social media and what you think looks good. And then he did have insecurity and he felt inadequate. So a couple questions here are, and this could even be with your own life, and I had this myself, is how do these environmental factors, like where you live and social media, how do they impact you? And it doesn't have to be you, but how do you think it impacted Mike? And what saved Lisa from doing it? Like, what made Lisa not do this? And she was close with the family too. It was a close-knit family, but what made her not care about looking a certain way? And also, in general, how do you think expectations fuel us in a negative way or in a positive way? So not all of financial therapy is about problem solving. Sometimes it's about celebrating what's working. So if anyone has any input on that, I could tell you real quickly for me, depending on, you know, whatever career I was in, actually, as a journalist, it was totally fine to Birkenstock and sweatshirt your way through life. That was totally fine. When I moved more into neuromarketing and consumer science, it was more about looking very businessy Wharton, you know, vibe, you know, blue suit, a lot of suits. And it just is interesting how our different careers do affect us. I mean, my background's green, not just because I love green and not just because my birthstone's emerald, because it also is a symbol of money. So this is also, you know, that's part of technically an environmental pressure, because maybe if I were working in a different type, I mean, before it was green, it was actually like a cream color, like a little bit of a blue, very relaxing. So we all may have bits and pieces of it, and sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's negative. So anything that you want to add, either in chat or just share, is totally fine and welcomed, actually. I should mention that I have a lot of clients. In fact, now I just do outreach. If you're not ridiculously wealthy, as I call it, everybody's outreach. So, but I have very, very wealthy clients that are in the $5 million up kind of space. And they have just as much financial anxiety. So if you're working with people that are very wealthy, don't assume that they're not carrying financial anxiety. Sometimes they have more, because most of them are self-made. They've worked really hard to get to where they are. Many of them are doctors, surgeons who worked really hard and did mission trips, and they did those rounds where they're working, 80 hours a week and not getting a lot of sleep. And there's also a lot of assumptions about them. And especially during COVID, there was a lot of anger towards them. And just people don't realize how stressful finance can be to people that are very wealthy. But I will tell you that very wealthy people, what I have learned from my very wealthy clients is that they do things very differently. So most of my very wealthy clients either walk or jog. Maybe they do an online app. Maybe they go to a gym. But my clients who are not as wealthy, they are wearing all the newest things. They have the most expensive yoga mat. They join every gym, every app. They just spend a lot of money, they just spend it differently. A lot of my wealthier clients are happy to, whether it's the suburbs or in the city, in Philadelphia, they are more apt to, or New York, they're more apt to just walk and jog. They're just happy to do that. They will wear, definitely, they actually do wear more of the same clothing. They sort of have, they're not exactly like Steve Jobs, where, he was always in black, but they do tend to have a couple of outfits, more like a capsule wardrobe, a couple of outfits for going out, a couple of outfits for casual, a couple of working out. They spend a little bit more on their food. They focus more on the quality of their food. They're against fast fashion usually. They're just a different, they teach me a lot about their day-to-day living. So that's kind of interesting. It is true. And that is a good, I didn't actually say that to him, but that would have been a really good idea, because at that time, I think Steve Jobs was still alive, but he would have known him. But that would have been a good idea to mention how a lot of wealthy people don't upgrade all of the time. They don't buy a lot of clothes. So that would be good. All right. I'm going to do one quick thing that I think is going to be awesome. So I want you to think about, what you're going to do is you're just going to make a diagonal. You could do this at any point now or whenever. You're going to make a diagonal on a piece of paper, and the bottom is going to be things you don't want in your life. And the top above it is going to be what you do want in your life. So the bottom might be like, I don't want to be homeless. And the top might be, I want to be wealthy. But it's going to be whatever you want. So have your specifics on that. And like I said, you don't have to do it now. You can. And if you do it, you can send me. I mean, there's enough of you. This is for the people that are on the live, because I don't know how many people will see this. So if you're on the live, then send it to me, and I can even talk to you about it through email, because it's going to be interesting. And I'm going to tell you why. So a lot of times when you have what you don't want, so for instance, a lot of people will say, I don't want to be homeless, or I don't know, I don't want to be obese. Like there's like things people say. But then when I say, well, what do you want? They'll say, I want to be healthy. I want to be happy. I want to be wealthy, wealthy in love. I want to be like, they'll bring up very vague things. The problem is if we have very specific things that we don't want, but vague things that we do want, like the couple that had a vague idea of what a house was, we are not going to be able to have steps to get to it. So just saying, I want to be wealthy is way too vague for our brains to handle. So it's true that if you say, I don't want to be homeless, you probably know how to not be homeless, whether it's paying rent or your mortgage. You probably know how to not be that. But or if you say, I don't want to be obese because I don't want, I have somebody in my family, or I was already obese once and I don't want to be obese. Then you may eat a certain way, or notice if your pants get tight, you start working out more. Or maybe you're already obese and you don't want to be more obese, whatever it is. So you will be very specific about what you don't want traditionally, not you, but people. And people tend to be more vague about what they do want. So it's really important to be very specific about the things that you want. And in this line, so down here would be the more vague things that you want. And the more something seems grand, like I want to be a multimillionaire would be way up here. Okay. Because there's a lot that you would have to do to get to this place. Maybe the first thing you would have to do is maybe you have debt. So maybe the first thing that you would do is get rid of debt. And that might even be here, depending on how much you have. So maybe it's get rid of the small credit cards, the store credit card type of thing. And and this is only with finance, you keep doing that. So if you're working with someone, this is important, and let them do anything in it. It's not just, so when you're working with finance therapy, if they want to talk about their weight, their love life, relationships, friends, whatever, have them write all of that there, because all of it can be pointed right back to somehow finance. Because if they want to lose weight or gain weight, if they want to date more, all of these things may take a certain amount of money or investment. So have them write all of their goals and all of the things they don't want as well. Make sure that they are not focusing on what they don't want and on what they do want, because often what we do is, and I believe it's probably evolutionary, that we want to stay safe. So we constantly focus on what we don't want. And that doesn't free up a lot of time or energy for what we do want. So you could do that, and you can definitely email me if you want to discuss like your own goals or whatever. Totally, like this is just a part of this. And also anyone who wants, and this is anybody who is going to watch this, anyone who wants the PDF of my one book that has a bunch of neuroscience-based activities for finance therapy, anyone who wants it, you can definitely have it. And I think Des will be the one who connects you with that. So don't buy it, you'll get a PDF of it. And your PDF should work fine on your Kindle or any tablet. And I think that I can even maybe make it into an EPUB file if you want. So anyway, I know this is like a little bit of a dry topic, but it is passionate for me because it helps people to have freedom and not feel shame and all of that. So anyway, okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I hope this has been helpful in some way, and that you look at finance therapy and just finance even a little bit differently, as not just abstract, but really connect it to our feelings and how we navigate even our love life and our families. So
I was